ABC's Alex Presha, along with civil rights attorney Nekima Levy Armstrong. Welcome to you both. And Alex, let me go to you first. On this remarkable day, opening statements and then enormously powerful testimony from Daunte Wright's mother, Katie Bryant. How do you think that went for the prosecution and the defense effort in the midst of her tears almost to cross-examine her and try to undermine her?
Well, Terry, it really sets a tone for this trial, right? I mean, I think normally you have, well, recently we've seen emotional testimony like that come a couple of days into a trial, or maybe even towards the end of one side making their case. But here is the first witness out of the gate, the mother of the deceased, Katie Bryant. Very, very compelling. And look, I mean, she has a very unique vantage point because, number one, yes, she is Daunte Wright's mom, but she actually talked to him during this traffic stop and witnessed portions of it, right? And so hearing her talk about her son being pulled over and him using the Facebook app to call her and having that conversation before officers come up on the car. You were having this discussion earlier during a break, and it reminded me a little bit of some of these talks that well, it's called having the talk. Oftentimes in families, black families, where you talk about interactions with law enforcement, and so that seemed to be something that they had certainly had in the past. They were having that conversation as police officers were basically approaching the car, him getting guidance from his mom, then hearing the phone being put up on the dash, the call disconnecting, her trying to get in contact again. The next time she actually is able to reach someone, it's a FaceTime. It's the woman who's in the passenger seat who then tells her that her son has been shot. And then her subsequent journey trying to figure out just where they were, and you juxtapose that with the body camera footage, and you see that interaction, and I mean it's something that really sticks with you. And you brought up the cross-examination, and look, I mean, I think that certainly the defense is going to try to paint Daunte Wright, they already have, as someone who posed a threat to law enforcement, and there are a number of ways that they've tried to paint this narrative that he could have been a threat, he could have been a perceived threat. You've heard them talk about the number of cars that officers encounter that have firearms in them. You've heard them talk about the marijuana residue inside that car. You've heard them lean into the warrants as well, and so look, I mean, hearing that certainly in their opening arguments, the defense's opening arguments, and then that cross-examination where there was at least a little bit of a hint that maybe this mother, Katie Bryant, didn't know her son as well as she thought she did. You have to wonder how that plays to the jury in here. And so that's going to be the one big question, right? Because obviously, you know, the defense has identified this as their path forward, but does that resonate with this jury, or does the jury think that the line of questioning in this cross-examination wasn't over the line? Did it go a little too far? I think that's going to be something to really kind of watch as this trial goes on.
It was striking to listen to, and I want to go to Nekima on this issue. So this is such a tragedy, this case, but it is the trial of a police officer, and it's pretty clear so far. We also just heard it in the cross-examination of Officer Lucky, who was with Kim Potter there. It's clear that the defense in this case wants to say this was, look, she made a mistake. She grabbed the wrong weapon, but it seems to me what they're trying to say is, you know, that Daunte Wright was acting in such a way that he represented a threat, that he was behaving, and that he had the kind of background that, what? I'm not quite sure where to go with that. She still grabbed the wrong weapon, but it does sound as if they're trying to down the defendant a little bit, down the victim, pardon me. He's down the victim in this case. Is that what you're getting, and does it surprise you? Do you think it'll work?
That's absolutely what I'm getting, and it's not surprising because if you recall, they did the same thing when George Floyd was killed. They tried to make him responsible for his own death, when the reality is that police are initiating these types of incidences. How do you pull someone over that is driving down the street, minding their own business because they have an air freshener hanging on their mirror? And then you check and see, oh, they have expired tabs. And we're in the midst of a pandemic. So why was that a priority when we are in a community where we have had to contend with much more crime and shootings, because of the pandemic and the aftermath of George Floyd being killed? And that was a question that we asked the next day when we were meeting with the mayor and the chief of police about why they racially profiled Daunte Wright to begin with. So we have to look at the full context of the situation and understand that Daunte Wright should have been able to continue driving down the street, minding his own business, but because he was driving while Black, we saw that ultimately this resulted in a loss of life. And in this situation, we cannot just ignore Kim Potter's behavior. She escalated the situation. She used the wrong weapon, whether it was an accident or not. As a 26-year veteran of the police department, she has to be held to a higher standard. We cannot have police officers engaging in reckless conduct, causing the life of civilians, and then not being held accountable. That's what's wrong with the system of policing in this country.
And that is really what this case is about. It's why it has drawn nationwide interest, because it is such a shocking incident in that context. Thank you, Nekima, for that. And let me go back to Alex on what's going on in that courtroom. Tell us a little bit about this jury, the jurors who will decide this case, and what you're hearing from reporters, who have access inside the courtroom.
Well, Terry, we talked about the jury makeup here on this case. So the 14, including the two alternates, we've got 7 men, 7 women, and the vast majority of them white. We've got 1 Black woman and 2 women of Asian descent. But the readout from today has been a jury that's been very, very engaged, and I will say, in particular, towards the end of testimony today with Officer Anthony Lucky, you saw the redirect and a series of objections from the defense that's going back and forth. At one point, it clearly kind of frustrated the prosecution, and that was something, you could see jurors' eyes going back and forth, reading the room there. Something else that was interesting is, at least according to these pool notes, we never saw Officer Lucky look in the direction of Kim Potter, which again is something, you can kind of glean from that what you will, but from taking the stand to walking out of the courtroom, that was something that the pooler noted, that he never looked in her direction.
Yeah, you can understand why. He was, first, that's a very difficult position for anyone to be in, but she almost killed him. He said that a projectile, likely the shell casing,
hit him,
from the right side of the gun, grazed his cheek. He was in a very, very bad position when she pulled the wrong weapon and killed Daunte Wright with it. It could just as easily have been Officer Stuckey. And Nekima, let me ask you, as we discuss the nature of this community and the jury pool, the trials of police officers, historically in our country, juries have given a great leeway to the conduct of police officers. We're having a rethinking of that in this country, perhaps. But do you think that plays a role, that juries in general, partly based on the arguments of defense lawyers for police officers, are told these are men and women who go out, serve in dangerous conditions for our community, basically cut them some slack. That's worked in the past. Do you expect to hear it here? Is that sort of what we're hearing? And do you think times have changed on that kind of defense?
I do believe that that's what we're hearing from the defense in terms of essentially trying to get the jury to cut Kim Potter some slack. And he's trying to insinuate that Daunte Wright was perhaps a dangerous individual. There was the residue of marijuana in the car and in the air, and there was no car insurance, and it wasn't registered in his name. All of these things are being used to insinuate that deadly force was allowed in this situation, or even the use of a taser, when we know that at the end of the day, this was a 20-year-old kid who was also a father, who was also a son, and who was speaking respectfully to the officer at the time, although he never should have been pulled over in the first place for having an air freshener hanging on his mirror. And so it's unclear in terms of how the jury will view this information. I think that in Hennepin County, particularly white residents here, tend to give police officers the benefit of the doubt. Although with all of the protests and demonstrations that have been happening over the years, and of course, with all of the attention that flowed from the murder of George Floyd, there are more folks here who are paying attention to these issues and who are giving less deference to police officers. And that is how we saw a conviction in the murder of George Floyd at the hands of Derek Chauvin. So I think all of us are waiting and wondering how the jury is going to view this information and whether they are going to have empathy for Daunte Wright and his family in light of everything that they have gone through.
Well, his mother certainly testified very powerfully today. His father will testify later on as well. Alex Presha and civil rights attorney Nekima Levy Armstrong, thanks very much for being with us tonight.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.